but I keep approaching those interactions. You've focused on value.
Hmm.
The first thing is you have to connect. You have to be talking to people in some way, whether it's by
Right.
Zoom or on the phone. But how would you approach that conversation? Because I remember you wrote something recently in your blog, which again I highly recommend everybody take a look at. That said that one of the worst questions in all of sales is something like, "How can I help you?"
Right.
Which is
Right.
really the question you should be trying to anticipate in your own mind. You're trying to answer the question in your own mind. So how would you approach that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote that after, uh, I'm getting calls from lots of people trying to say, trying to empathize and genuinely be nice. And, they're trying to sell you something, and I don't resent that, but they say, how can I help you? Well, the problem is, I don't know. Uh,
Right.
and you look at small business people right now, or even large, I work with primarily very, very large corporations. They're experiencing something they have never experienced before. So when I go to them with the question, how do I help? I uh, they don't know how to answer that.
Mhm.
So their better questions are, they're things like, what are the most critical issues you're facing today? How are you coping with this situation and how are you moving forward? The other kinds of questions that are contextually much better. There's some things like, how do we share some insights
Mhm.
in some senses that here's some things we're seeing
Yeah.
in the marketplace. Here's some things that we're seeing other people do.
Mhm.
And again, I look at this is no different than what great salespeople did 6 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years ago, is helping educate the customers on the issues most critical to them now. Um, and whether it's educate them about insights, educating them about what other people are doing.
Mhm.
I remember one of my very, very first accounts, I was kind of loosely involved in the banking industry,
Mhm.
is that I sold mainframe computers in the late 70s, early 80s to Chase Manhattan Bank.
Mhm.
Um, and and I'd go in, I was a junior salesperson, so I'd start at One Chase Plaza at the first floor, and I'd work my way all the way up to the top floor. Then I'd go to One New York Plaza and work my way all the way up to the top floor,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth, and keep recycling that. And what I found, the way I was most helpful to them sometimes was sharing what was going on in the bank, because I knew
Right.
more
They
of what
didn't
was
know.
going on in the bank than they did. And that was helpful. And then I said, do you realize these people are doing this? If you started doing this, it would have improved your ability to operate, blah, blah, blah. And so people right now, because of the sense of isolation, because of the sense of disconnectedness, because they're facing something they've never faced before, are looking for guidance. They're looking for this concept I call sense making. How do we make sense of the situation that we have now? So a lot of that's, what are the biggest things you're facing right now?
Mhm.
How are you addressing that? Or here's how we can help you address
Mhm.
that. Or things like, we've noticed other bankers, other small business people doing these things. How might that work in your company?
Yeah.
And those kinds of things.
I think that's great advice. And when you think about what value you're bringing
Hmm.
to your customers and to your prospects, it also is the network that you have. I always tell people that they've got to manage themselves first, but they've got to manage their network. So there are
Right.
people in the network. Accountants, for example, have a lot of interaction with their customers who may or may not be customers that you're seeking as a banker. One of my friends told a story last week about getting a call from an accountant who we didn't really know all that well, but the accountant thought that this individual might have some information.
Yep.
Information's important. So he, instead of responding by email, Bill picked up the phone, called the accountant, said, "What's the issue you're trying to address?" And it turned out he had just gotten off the phone with a plastic surgeon who was desperate. he was desperate because his banker was not returning phone calls. So he was totally uncertain of how to proceed. So Bill said, I'll call him, don't worry. He called him. This is 15 minutes time elapsed between the plastic surgeon hanging up with his accountant and talking to a real banker. And the plastic surgeon said, thank God, if you can help me with this, I'll move all my business to you. I'll move my personal business to you.
Yeah.
And it's an example, again, of exactly what you're saying. Sometimes people need a calm presence, and they need somebody who can help them think through some issues. And if a banker has done his job with others, and I think most of them are, they have perspective. And if they ask the kind of questions you're asking, it would be great.
Exactly. And so, you know, again, there's kind of this attitude that people have of what happened before and what's happening now. And the way we sell, the way we work with people, the way we manage and lead our people, nothing's changed, except it's become much more urgent or much more critical, or the sins of the past have become much more visible.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of an interesting opportunity here, is because all of this, there's this heightened attention, there's this thing that, you know, the phone actually works, and I can create value for customers on the phone if I just respond to them rather than ignore them or shoot them an email or things like that. Or you know, if I talk to the customer about the issues they're facing right now and give them some insights, or talk to them about how they can do that, or I leverage my network. Those are all the things great salespeople were doing last year and the previous years, and that's what made them great salespeople. And now we see we're forced to do that. The good news is we're learning that it works, and we're learning people value that. You know, what